Our topic is Pesach Sheini. We all know the story of Pesach Sheini, right? The story of Pesach Sheini is in Chumash. We're going to be talking about today is, I don't know what it's called, Yom de Pagra, is Kashas, but the topic is Pesach Sheini. And I'm going to be talking to you about Pesach Sheini, and in Mitzvah after lunch, I guess at 1:20, I'm going to be talking to the seminary girls, Beis girls, also about Pesach Sheini. Today is Yud Aleph Iyar, so Pesach Sheini is Friday, and I was asked by the school to talk about Pesach Sheini today, so that's what we're going to be doing. Pesach Sheini is a very interesting story. Interesting story was that the Yidden were given a surprise. Yidden were given a surprise. What was the surprise? Surprise was that when Hashem gave them the mitzvah of Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, He said to them, Korban Pesach, and you're bringing Eretz Yisrael. When you come into the Holy Land, you're going to bring a Korban Pesach. Which means that the 40 years that the Yidden were in the Midbar, they did not do Korban Pesach. They didn't do Korban Pesach for the 40 years. And I want to tell you what was the consequence of this, or at least one of the consequences of this. This is a bit of conjecture, maybe even more than a bit of conjecture. But nevertheless, it's true. One of the things about Korban Pesach is, girls, you're supposed to listen to me, not to communicate with each other. You can't bring in Korban Pesach if you don't have a Bris Mila. Moreover, even if you have a Bris, if there are members in your household that don't have a Bris Mila, you can't give them Korban Pesach. So when Yidden were in Mitzrayim, and Hashem said that they should do the Korban Pesach, the Yidden had no choice, but there were mass milas. Many Yidden did a Bris Mila right before they left Egypt. They do a Bris Mila so they could bring Korban Pesach. Which is, of course, why in the Haggadah we make reference to two bloods, right? We say, Ve'ever alayich, ve'erech mizbeiseses bedamoyech. We say this in the Haggadah. I will pass over you and I will see that you're surrounded by damoyech, by your blood. Ve'emelach, and I will tell you, bedamayech chayi, with your blood you live. Ve'emelach bedamayech chayi, with your blood you live. Twice. And I think that Rebbe writes in his Haggadah, because there's two bloods. There's the blood of the Korban Pesach and there's the blood of the Bris Mila. Yidden could not bring the Korban Pesach, Kolben, but they had to do a Bris Mila, and every member of the household, even their avodim. So right before Yidden left Mitzrayim, there was a mass circumcision. For 40 years there was no Korban Pesach. So Yidden didn't do a Bris. Now you have to be careful how you say this. The whole Yiddishkeit is based on a Bris. Rashi says about Shevet Levi, Ubrischa Yinseiru, they guarded the Bris even when they were in the Midbar. But most Yidden didn't do the Bris because it was dangerous. There was not the kind of winds that were necessary for healing. But you have what's called Givas Ha'arelim in the beginning of Yeshua. They crossed over the Yarden on the 10th day of Nisan. The first full day in Eretz Yisrael was Yud Aleph Nisan. And they did a Bris. They did massive Bris. Because out of Pesach that year, 2488, they crossed over to Eretz Yisrael and they made a Korban Pesach 4 days after they crossed into the land. So they all did Bris Milas because for 40 years they didn't do a Bris. So the lack of Korban Pesach results in a lack of Bris Mila. The renewal of Korban Pesach renews the Bris Mila. And I think you can even say, everybody knows that Eliyahu Hanavi comes to the Seder. Eliyahu Hanavi comes to every single Seder. Now the reason, and Eliyahu Hanavi also comes to every Bris. The reason it comes to every Bris is because Eliyahu Hanavi was a Navi, and he said, Bris Chayin Tzeiru. That Chas v'Shalom, Yidden have abandoned Bris Mila. And the most basic in Yiddishkeit is Shemer HaBris, is the Bris Mila. And because Eliyahu Hanavi said, Bris Chayin Tzeiru, Hashem gave him a punishment, because even Tzadikim Gemurim are not allowed to speak Lashon Hara about Yidden, like it says in the Geras Hashmat from the Rambam. And he comes to every Bris, Eliyahu Hanavi does, and he's a witness that people are Shemer HaBris, that Yidden do Bris Mila. And like I tell you always, today, there's so many Yidden who are not frum. 9 out of 10 Yidden at least in this world today are unfortunate not Shemet or mitzvah. The mitzvah which they do more than any other is Bris Mila. And of course it doesn't make any sense. L'chayda, the first mitzvah people should discontinue is Bris Mila. Nevertheless, the fact is people do Bris Mila. And they don't understand why, because it goes to the very core. The deepest nekuda in a Yid, practically, is Bris Mila. So anyway, you can't do a Korban Pesach without a Bris Mila. So Eliyahu Hanavi has to show up to every Bris, and Eliyahu Hanavi has to show up to every Pesach Seder, because they're connected. The Bris Mila and the Korban Pesach and Yetzias Mitzrayim are connected. So 40 years in the Midbar, Yid will not bring Korban Pesach. No Korban Pesach. So then again, it's hard. You don't want to speak Chas v'Shalom, Nish b'Shvach and Shal Yisrael, especially since I don't know what I'm talking about. The fact was in the Midbar they didn't do a bris. And had there been a Korban Pesach, they would have had to do a bris, otherwise they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. Comes second year, 2449. Hashem comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says to him, V'yasu b'nei Yisrael as a Pesach b'moed, or a Pesach b'moed. They should bring Korban Pesach. And says Rashi, it happened only once. The second year in the Midbar, Hashem says, okay, Bris Mila is destined for the coming to Yisrael. This year they should make a Korban Pesach. What happened? The Yidden were not ready. So they scrambled. And again, I don't know how many Yiddish kids needed to do a bris between the first year and the second year. I'm sure there were many, many children at the Chaparan and make a bris so they could eat Korban Pesach. But then there were people who couldn't fix it. Right? If you don't have a bris, you make a bris. You had people who were Tmeim L'Nefesh Adam. They were spiritually unclean. And they were not careful to be Matayah themselves, whatever the lumdus was. And all of a sudden they find out that in so many days of the Korban Pesach, it's called the Korban Tzibur. It's a Korban Yochid, but it's also called the Korban Tzibur. Avar Zmani Batla Karbani. You can only bring it out of Pesach. And they come around to Moshe Rabbeinu, wait a minute. Lomani Gora? It's not fair. In other words, if you wanted to articulate it, you would say like this. If you give us 6 months notice, or even a month notice, that on this and this date, there's going to be a Korban Pesach, so we'll be metired ourselves, we'll get ourselves ready, and like I said, and maybe they have to do a bris, and they're bringing Korban Pesach, but you come last minute, and you say bringing Korban Pesach, and it's not fair, we're being deprived. So they came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they complained, and the complaint was Lo Mani Gora, right? INF. What's INF, huh? It's not INMF, it's not my fault. Lo Mani Gora. So of course Moshe Rabbeinu says, Imdu v'eshma b'yitzav Hashem lachem. Rashi explains, Moshe Rabbeinu's relationship with the Eibishter is like our relationship to our Rav, to our Pesach. The Eibishter was Moshe Rabbeinu's Hamalam Teir Lam Yisrael. The Eibishter was Moshe Rabbeinu's Rebbe, and he was also Moshe Rabbeinu's Rebbe. He taught him Teira. So Moshe Rabbeinu was muftach. He was sure that he comes to the Eibishter with a shaila, his Rav has to paskin for him. Your Rav is auf eigen gesunden starke Rabbi Broin and Rabbi Azdeben, Agishet. I'm looking at Rabbi Shvei. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu's Rav was the Eibishter. If you call up your Rav, he doesn't paskin, what do? Yeah, he has to paskin. The Eibishter had to paskin for Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the Eibishter and he says, what should I do? You're not complaining. You didn't give enough notice. As a consequence of this Tmeim L'Nefesh Adam. And Rashi says that there's a big chiddush, the Gemara speaks about this, that they could have been metired themselves. The 7th day would have been at a Pesach. But there's a special Gzeres HaKosov. By a Tmei Mes, they have to be tahir before the Korban is mukrav, not only before the Korban is nechal, and they couldn't eat the Korban Pesach. So, the Eibishter says they should make a Pesach Sheini. That in a month from now, they should make a Pesach Sheini. And that's what happened, they made a Pesach Sheini. And the Torah tells us the story. It's a famous story in the Torah. Now, as far as we know, there's no such thing as Rosh Hashanah Sheni, right? Rosh Hashanah comes, Aleph Tishrei comes, and for whatever reason, you didn't prepare yourself. You didn't make the Eibishter a king, you didn't blow Shofar, Rachman L'Zlan. You didn't have a Shofar. Came Yom Kippur, didn't know it was Yom Kippur, you didn't fast yet. There's no Rosh Hashanah Sheni, there's no Yom Kippur Sheni, there's no Sukkot Sheni, there's no Simchas Torah Sheni, there's no Chanukah Sheni, there's no Purim Sheni, there's no Shavuos Sheni. You missed it, you missed it. Pesach has a Pesach Sheni. So on this idea, there's a word from Friedrich and Rebbe, yeah, which of course is the Hayom Yom of Yudalad. I'm going to read it inside. Okay, I'm going to read inside the Hayom Yom of Yudalad. It says like this. I'm reading it inside. Pesach Sheini in Yoni. The idea of Pesach Sheini is, as says Nitah came for Fallen. There's no such thing as too late. Nitah. There's no such thing as too late. Men can alamo farichten. A person can always correct it. That's what Pesach Sheini means. Afilu mi shahaya tamich. God forbid someone was spiritually unclean. Mi shahaya v'darachai, he was spiritually far away. Or afilu lachem. You know why he's tamei? You know why he's far away? Because he was lazy. In other words, the story was in the year 2449 that the Yidden were tamei and they told Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't have enough time to make ourselves pure. But sometimes it's lachem. Lachem means you're tamei. There's enough time to be metar yourself, and you didn't do it. There's enough time to come into the Beis HaMikdash, and you didn't come. You chose to not do what you needed to do to get yourself ready to being a Korban Pesach. Von deswegen can man misaken, and you can always correct it. The inyan of Pesach Sheini is that you can always fix it. Now, I have a fantasy. Okay, now girls, please don't take me seriously, but listen carefully, yeah? I have a fantasy that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a new Sanhedrin. Mamash, it's a fantasy of mine. There's going to be a new Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, after Mashiach comes, are going to be smart, like the Tanoim and the Ameroyim and even the Nevi'im. And they're going to revisit all the halachas, right? And they're going to paskin different halachas. We're going to have different dinim. Mashiach comes, we're going to revisit the whole Teshuva, different halachas. I have this fantasy that when Mashiach comes, the Chachamim are going to come along, and they're going to open up the Parsha Pesach Sheini, and then they're going to bring the Hayom Yom. And they open up the Hayom Yom, and they're going to say that the message of Pesach Sheini as it's netokim for fallen, and they're going to taine that not just to be a Pesach Sheini, there should be a Sukkot Sheini and a Shavuos Sheini and a Rosh Hashanah Sheini. No matter what, netokim for fallen. This is a fantasy of mine, and that's exactly what this is. It's a dimyon. It's an imaginary idea. The Mashiach comes, you're going to say, why just Pesach Sheini? Why not Shavuos Sheini? If a person missed Yom Kippur, even in Yanim Pnimim, he could have done tshuva better. There's a Yom Kippur Sheini, you can always fix. The Hira of Pesach Sheini is make an alamol mesakens that you can always correct. You can always correct. You can always correct. This is the lesson of Pesach Sheini. Now, I want to talk about this Pesach Sheini, right? And of course, the most acute part of this is it's lachem. You didn't bring the Korban Pesach because you were lazy. Now the halach is, if you're not bringing Korban Pesach, chayv kodes. But if you're b'derech ha'chayka, if you're tesvav mil, outside Yerushalayim, you're derech ha'chayka, so you're part of Pesach. If a person did not do what he needed to do because of lachem, he was lazy, there's still always an opportunity to correct. That's the message of Pesach Sheini. And of course, the simple lesson of Pesach Sheini is the lesson of tshuva. A person can always do tshuva. A person can always correct. Why? Why did the Eibush give us a Pesach Sheini? Hashem gave us an opportunity to have a relationship with Him. And we stunk it up. We were lazy, we were negligent, we were apathetic, we were indifferent, we were immature, we acted like children. The fact that we had a chance to have a relationship in the first place is beautiful enough. I missed that opportunity. Why should the Eibush give me a second chance? And I'm going to tell you the answer. It's a very, very simple thing. You know why there's a Pesach Sheini? You know why the Eibush always gives us a second chance? Because we have a basic misunderstanding of what's going on in Yiddishkeit. We think that the Eibush needs from us tefillin, mezuzah, kashrus, Korban Pesach. What the Eibush really needs from us is ourselves. What does the Eibush want from a Jew? The Jew. Or to say it in different words, what is Hashem really interested in? Hashem is really interested in people. So if we didn't do a mitzvah, it was unfortunate, we missed an opportunity. So you could say, okay, you missed it, your chance is lost. But when you understand that the Eibush is more interested in the makriv, in the person bringing the korban, than the korban itself, it makes complete sense that there should be a Pesach Sheini. The Eibush doesn't want to lose us. Not he doesn't want to lose his mitzvahs. He doesn't want to lose us. So there has to be a Pesach Sheini. There has to be another opportunity for us to be able to repair, to correct, to heal, to fix what we failed to do correctly the first time around. Or to say it in different words. This is Kabbalah words. You all heard this expression, yeah? But you have to understand what the expression means. Ki lo yidach mimenu nidach. Ki lo yidach mimenu nidach. Right? No Jew will be left behind. The Eibush does not let anything get lost. Right? Let's talk about it in practical terms. You have a person, and he's a nudnik, and he's obnoxious, and he has bad midas, and he's spiteful, and he's everything bad. And you say to yourself, who needs that person? And the Teretz says the Eibush does. Vaharai created him. It says in the Medrash, and the Rebbe brings it in many siches, that there were 600,000 Jews by Har Sinai. One of those 600,000 Jews was a fellow by the name of Dosan. Another one of the 600,000 Jews was a fellow by the name of Aviram. And Dosan and Aviram, I don't know if they were brothers, they're called brothers. Yeah, Bnei Eliyahu. They were children of Reuven, for Shevet Reuven. It says the Medrash of Dosan is missing, or Aviram is missing. The Eibishter doesn't give the Torah to Yidden, period. If Doslan is missing or Aviram is missing, the Eibishter does not give the Torah to Yidden. And you scratch your head and say to the Eibishter, the Bein Shalom, who needs them? They're junk. They're only trouble. Their whole inyan is mumalahaches. And the Eibishter says, I do. I need them. And you say to the Eibishter, why? And the Eibishter says, basically, when you'll be God, you'll understand why. Like the Vart. I heard this from my father as a child. The Frierdiker Rebbe lived in America in the last the decade of his life. He had a lot of Isnagnos. And the Frierdiker Rebbe took a new path. When the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, he undertook to become Hamalamed Terelam Yisrael. Children and mikvatara basics, right? He wasn't any more focused on the highest level of Avodas Hashem, of Chassidus Chabad. Instead, the Rebbe was involved in saving Yiddish and Neshamas. And there was a Yid who was a Machal Shabbos Befaresya. He was notoriously Machal. Everybody who drove a car, he used to drag his car, drive to Crown Heights. He had enough decency to park on Union Street. He would put his keys in his pocket, and he would come in, and the Rebbe always let him in upstairs. So the rumor was that the Rebbe Rayatz once waited for him at Rosh Hashanah for Tkiyas. Imagine that. So the Mesnagdim in Lakewood, who really didn't like the Frierdiker Rebbe, so one of them said, the Frierdiker was Makad of Yidden that are in the category that you're not allowed to be Makad of them, the Rishoyim. And when this comment reached the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said, Ihr versteht nicht meine Menschen. You don't understand my people. In other words, when you'll be a Rebbe, you'll have a perspective which is a little bit closer to Das Elyon, to where the Eibishter looks at things. And if you look at things a little bit, where the Eibishter looks at things, you'll understand why Dosan has to be at Har Sinai, and Aviram has to be at Har Sinai. And if they're not there, the Torah is not given to the Jewish people. That's how it works. Now, the first part of the story I heard yet as a child. But I want to tell you another part of this story, which is very unpleasant. I heard this from a very, very reliable source. The story is true, but I think the two things are connected, but I'm not 100% sure. That after the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, and the Rebbe's Logazon and our Rebbe became Rebbe, that Yid continued driving his car to 770. And once by Fabrengen, the Rebbe turned to him and told him, Lega vek de Schlislach. The Rebbe wouldn't take the keys from him. The Rebbe said, put the keys down on the table of the Fabreng. And he put the keys on the table. Now, if you're sensitive, turn off your sound for 1 second, okay? That Yid passed away before the next Shabbos. You could put your sound back on, yeah? He when he put the keys down, that was his way of pledging that he's never going to drive. He's become Shem Shabbos. And the Eibishter Posha did not give him the opportunity to keep Shabbos. Now, how do we understand such in Yonim? He had finally commits to keep Shabbos. This is Rebske Zachen, Himmel Zachen. But the Rebbe said, if you understood my people, you understand that there's no such thing as a bad Jew. Because we think that the Eibishter's interest is our mitzvahs and our Torah. It's not true. The Eibishter's interest is us. And he has us through the mitzvahs and the Torah. So it makes complete sense that there should be a Layidach. If a Yid gets lost, the Eibishter has a loss. If a Yid misses a mitzvah, but he still has the Yid, there's a Pesach Sheini. And that's the story of Pesach Sheini. Pesach Sheini means a token verfallen. There's no such thing as I missed an opportunity and I can't get it back. Why? Because the Eibishter's interest is not the opportunity. The Eibishter's interest is the person. It's me and you, all of us, each of us. And that's the taich of Pesach Sheini. And that's the taich of Leyidach Mimenu Nidach. There's no such thing as lost because you're a Yid. And I've told this to you before. In physics, in science, there's a law called the law of conservation. And I saw from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe once spoke about the law of conservation. I'll tell you what the Rebbe said about it also. The law of conservation says no matter is ever created, no matter is ever destroyed, it only changes form. In other words, the Eibishter created the universe. The universe is made up of pieces, particles, pieces. Those pieces coalesce into bigger and bigger pieces until you have very large things, or gigantic things, or massive things, or gargantuan things, yeah? But it's made up of pieces. From the moment Hashem created the world, as long as there's going to be a universe, that number of pieces is finite and constant. It never gets more, it never gets less, it's always the same. Because you cannot create matter or you can't destroy matter. You know, you could almost say that matter is God. The chomer, the material from which everything is made up, is God. It has an Ein-Sof property. You can't destroy it. Hashem made matter in such a way, you can only change its form, you cannot destroy it, and you cannot create it. In Teva. And that's, in Ruchni is this such Kilidach Menanidach. The Eibishter made a world. It's impossible for anything in the Eibishter's world to be farfallen, to fall away and be lost, because the Eibishter said, Nitoken farfallen. There's nothing lost. Now let me qualify this. Let me give you context. The Rebbe has a sikha, which is Mitanid Zogen Azeh Shmuel Zuna, but this is one of my favorite sikhas of the Rebbe. The Rebbe has a sikha where he talks about the Mabul. The flood, Pashas Neach. And in the sikha, the Rebbe asks the famous kasha. That it says in the Pasuk, that after the Mabul, Neach brought a Korban, and when Neach brought the Korban, the Eibishter made a Shvu, Hashem swore. And along with the Shvuah came Ois HaBris. There was a covenant and there was a sign of the Bris, of the covenant. The Eibishter swore, I will never destroy the world again. I will never again destroy the world. And he said, Zois Ois HaBris es kashti nasati ba'onon. The sign is as kashti, so the rainbow is placed in the clouds, and this is Ois Bris, that every time I'm angry and I want to destroy my world, I'm going to see V'hoya ba'ananani ona la'aretz, v'nira sa'akesh es ba'on, there's going to be clouds, there's going to be a rainbow, and I won't destroy the world. In fact, at almost every moment in time, someplace on this earth there's a rainbow. I mean, you and I live in big cities, we don't see rainbows very, very often. I remember, I'll never forget this. This goes back, I don't know how many years, at least 10 years, maybe 20. It was Yutis Kislev. We walked outside the yeshiva, and there was a rainbow, a vertical rainbow, straight from heaven to earth. It was the most beautiful sight. It was Rosh Hashanah L'Dach, Rosh Hashanah L'Chsidis, and there was this massive rainbow, from the sky till the ground. It was remarkable to see. But someplace on earth there's always a rainbow. So if you learn Chumash, you can ask a Pasha Takasha. Every second Hashem wants to destroy the world. If there's always a rainbow in Greenland, in Iceland, in Antarctica, in England, in Seattle, Washington, in Baltimore, Maryland, in Washington, D.C., in New York City, in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem is always angry. Every second the Eibishter wants to destroy his world and he has to put a rainbow in the sky. He shouldn't do it. It doesn't make any sense. So the Rebbe has a sikh in Rashi, Pshute Shel Mikra, and he says a moidendike word, a gewaldike word. What he says is that we misunderstand the Mabul. Again, I don't know how this is Api Drush, but Api Pshat. To us, we understand the Mabul that Hashem is going to destroy the whole world. Everything. Just wipe everything out. And when Hashem wants to bring a Mabul, he puts a cloud in the sky, he puts a rainbow in the cloud, and he doesn't destroy his world. Says the Rebbe, that's not the Pshat of a Mabul. A Mabul does not mean that Hashem wants to destroy his world. A Mabul means that Hashem wants to destroy any one thing in the world. It could be a microorganism. It could be a subatomic particle. But he wants to destroy it in such a way where it's gone. The definition of a Mabul is not to destroy the whole world. The definition of a Mabul, to use scientific terms, is to defy the law of conservation. Something in Hashem's world, Hashem breaks it and destroys it so that it's not. And this is what the Eibishter swore. Hashem swore, nothing in my world is going to be destroyed so that it should be destroyed. Everything in my world that I break is really reconstruction. Chas v'shalom, somebody dies, from that material, from that body becomes carbon and whatever other compounds form from it, and then in 100 years from today, in 1,000 years from today, there could be another living person walking. The Rebbe once said this by Fabringen. I heard it from myself. That it says in Sifrei Chakira that a human being may be walking around with the biomass that was once a different person 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, because it's recycled. And that's the Pshat Mabul. When Hashem swore, I'm never bringing a Mabul, he said, I'm not even destroying a minutiae. Nothing in my world will ever be destroyed if it's not for constructive purposes, to rebuild. So now you have a koshke v'kavachem. Mabul, the Krisis Bris, the covenant that Hashem made for Noach was not with Jews. It wasn't even with people. Hashem swore that the way his world exists is that nothing is ever going to be created, nothing is ever going to be destroyed. When it comes to Yidden, nitokim verfallen. Is compounded pi kama, because Bereshit Yisrael b'Shat Torah, Yidden are the purpose of the creation. There's no such thing as a Jew that you could say is junk. There's no such thing as a Jew that you could say, we don't need him, the Eibishter needs. There's an expression that I heard once, which is really important. When you turn your back on a person or a situation, they don't disappear. A lot of times we do this. I'm guilty of this 100 times, 1,000 times. You can't deal with somebody. You can't deal with something. So you make believe it isn't there, but it doesn't go away. It's there. And if not today, the expression is in Siddur. Bein begilgul zeh, bein begilgul lachet. Today or tomorrow in another gilgul, it's going to have to be healed. And that's the Yom Tov of Pesach Sheini. The Yom Tov of Pesach Sheini is, the Eibishter gave us a day, that the inyan of this day is to celebrate. You miss a chance, you have a second chance. So in Chumash, it's one mitzvah. Like I said to you before, there's only Pesach Sheini. There's no Rosh Hashanah Sheini. There's no Yom Kippur Sheini. There's no Sukkot Sheini. There's no Simchas Torah Sheini. No Chanukah Sheini. No Purim Sheini. No Shavuot Sheini. There's no Yutas Kislev Sheini. There's no Yitrat Sheini. There's one opportunity. There's no Yud Aleph Nisan Sheini. But in Pnimis HaYonim, what Pesach Sheini teaches is that it's not unique to Pesach Sheini. Right? In Chumash it says that you bring a Korban Pesach and Yudal Dir, the second month, year. At the same time you would have brought the Korban Pesach 1 month before you bring the Pesach Sheini. But B'Pnimis HaYonim, in Chassidus, the lesson of Pesach Sheini is that no Jew is ever lost, and no Jew doesn't get a chance to come back. The Taichla Yidach Mena Nidach is that save kol save, every Jew comes back. That's the end of Pesach Sheini.
Could you re-explain why does Hashem give us another chance? Like, He wants us regardless of our Torah mitzvahs. Can you explain that again?
The explanation, Bekitz and Nimratz, is the Eibishter's interest is not our Torah and mitzvahs. The Eibishter's interest is us. If somebody gives you a job, go to the store and buy peaches, and you didn't, so you failed at your mission. You was told to go to the store and buy peaches. You didn't buy the peaches. And the person, your mother said, why didn't you buy the peaches? So you have an excuse. I was lazy. I couldn't make it. I couldn't cross the street. I wasn't interested. So that person doesn't have what he wants or she wants. If that person's interest was peaches, they don't need anymore. Because to them, you were a shliach to buy peaches. You failed to buy peaches, so that's you no longer. What happens if the person who sent you to the store to buy peaches wasn't really interested in peaches? They were interested in creating a connection between them and you. How do you create a connection between two people? You do things for each other. So this person, this king, says to you, do me a favor, go to the store and buy peaches. You think they're interested in peaches. They're interested in connecting themselves to you. If you didn't buy peaches, what are they going to throw you in the garbage? They're not interested in peaches. They were never interested in peaches. They were interested in you. And you're still there. The peaches, yesterday's peaches are gone. I can't get peaches for yesterday. They're gone. But the person who was supposed to buy those peaches is still around. Since Hashem, Torah mitzvah, we connect to Hashem through Torah mitzvahs. But what are we giving him? What is his real interest? If his real interest is Torah mitzvah, we don't do Torah mitzvahs, he doesn't need us. But if his interest is us, and we didn't do Torah mitzvahs, why would he throw us in the garbage? He was never interested, really, in Torah mitzvahs. His real interest that we should do Torah mitzvahs. Because when we learn Torah and we do mitzvahs, we have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as long as we exist, in the Token Fafalon, we can always have another opportunity to connect to Hashem ourselves, to the Eibishter. That's the Yom Tov of Pesach Sheini. The Yom Tov of Pesach Sheini says that since the Eibishter's interest is not the mitzvah so much, the mitzvah is also very, very important. The interest is the person doing the mitzvah. As long as that person exists, they have an opportunity to do it again. Was that clearer? Yeah? Okay, so I want to move on to another idea. The Friedrich Rebbe says in the Sichos, a gewaltige Wort, that in Yiddishkeit there are 3 Shenis. There are 3 number 2s. There is Pesach Sheini, which is in the Chumash. There is Nefesh Hashenis, which is in the Tanya, and it's based on a pasuk, I think, or the Mama Chazal. And then there's Cheder Sheini. Now I have to explain to you what these three things are, but I'm going to explain them to you backwards. Okay, if you're writing this down, I'm going to say it again. There is Pesach Sheini, which is in the Chumash. There's Nefesh Hashenis, which is in the Tanya. And then there's Cheder Sheini, which is in the customs of Chassidic Chabad, of Chassidim. Cheder Sheini means that a shul has a second room, a second cheder. Not a Weiber shul. The men's section has a second room. The Cheder Sheini in the Lubavitcher shul had a name. In the Lubavitcher shul, the Cheder Sheini was called the Chabad Nitze. Chabad, Ches Beis Dalet, Nitze, Nun, Yud, Tzaddik Ayin. Chabad Nitze means the room for Chabad. The Chabad Nitze was usually a small room, and it was quiet, and the only people who went into the Chabad Nitze were people who were Marichim et Tefillah. If people daven, and they wanted to daven long, they wanted a quiet and a private place, they would go into this Chabad Nitze, into this room, which was designated for this purpose, and nobody bothered them, and they were able to daven and learn. I have an acquaintance, a neighbor of mine. He's much older than I am. But he told me a story. He says he lived in Montreal. He was probably born in the 50s, the early 50s, maybe even the late 40s. He lived in Montreal. And there was a shul, it was a yeshiva, a shul, a Lubavitcher shul, a yeshiva. And there was a coat room. And the kid used to play in the coat room. They played hide and seek. One of the plays had the coat. There was a chassid whose name was Rabbi Moshe Reuben, alav hashalom. Rabbi Moshe Reuben, my daughter is married to a Reuben, to his grandson. Rabbi Moshe Reuben was a very chassidic sherid from Amalekah Zeiten. He was a special neshama that Moshe Reuben was. And he would go daven in the coat room. He wanted to daven in a place where nobody would bother him and nobody would see him. So when they had a minyan in the shtibel, so he obviously had to be by the minyan to hear Baruch Hu and Kaddish and Kedusha and Kriyas HaTorah. But after davening, he would go into the coat room. That was his Chabad Nitze. So this man told me, I was a little kid, and we used to run into the coat room and run out of the coat room and run around him in their games. He says, not only he never got upset, he didn't even see us. He was busy davening. The kids were disturbing him. He was busy davening. Anyway, the Chabad Nitze was not made for people to be disturbed, but nevertheless, in Chabad Hasidic tradition, there was a small shtibel that was called the Chabad Nitze. It was a secondary room which was meant for a place for people to daven barichas. Now, when I was growing up, when I was a child, 770 had a coat room. 770's coat room was a disaster. There were more coats on the floor than were on the hangers. The coat room of 770 was meant to be the Chabad Nitze. It was a small little room, and the kids used to play and fight and machen zachnadish in this coat room. But the coat room was there for people to daven. Now, as more and more people started coming to 770, and there was no more room, so they broke down all the walls. And they broke down all the walls so that there should be more place for people to daven. I mean, you girls are in the Weiber shul. Underneath the Eastern Parkway Weiber shul, there's a big men's section that men daven. There used to be a wall. It used to be the end of the shul, and that was where the Chabad Nitze was. So as a child, I remember when they needed to make 770 bigger. There was no more room, so they took down walls, and they removed the coat room. Eventually, they removed the bathrooms. The bathrooms used to be upstairs. They had to move the bathrooms into the basement, so they kept on making the shul bigger and bigger and bigger. So there was a bacher at that time who found a siche from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about the Chabad Nitze. And again, what's a Chabad Nitze? A Chabad Nitze is a Cheder Sheini. It's a second room where the Eidim used to daven. So there's a sicha from Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe says, in a shul on a Chabad Nitze tormen ish davenen. If you have a shul, and it doesn't have a place for people to be mairech betfila, you're not allowed to daven there. It's a very strong sikh. In a shul on a Chabad Nitze tormen ish davenen. If a shul does not have a place for people to be mairech betfila, you're not allowed to daven there. So this bacher got little stickers, and he printed the words from the Frierdiker Rebbe in a shul on a Chabad Nitze, and he pasted them. 770 Baruch Hashem is meruba b'poles. There's a lot of beams, and every beam he put on a sticker. In a shul on a Chabad Nitze, 770 became a shul on a Chabad Nitze. There was pushed no place to make a Cheder Sheini, So this was his protest, and Ashul on Chabad. I remember this as a child. Now, there's still no Chabad in 770, but in the very, very back, they call it the tunnel, underneath the porch where the Rebbe used to come in the period after Chav Zayin Oder. There's a little room, and that counts as a Chabad Nitzeh. But in Chabad tradition, there used to be a Cheder Sheni. And the purpose for the Cheder Sheni is to daven. And of course, davening to Hashem, trying to connect to the Eibush Beif and Pnimi, generally, without going into specifics, is like the idea of Teshuva. So the Friedrich Rebbe says there's three Shenis. There is the Cheder Sheni, where people daven. There's the Nefesh HaShenis. Nefesh HaShenis b'Yisrael is the Cheder L'Kam Imal Mamish, and then there is Pesach Sheini. So the Friedrich Rebbe used to say, it's a word for Friedrich Rebbe, you have to take the Nefesh HaShenis and bring him into the Cheder Sheni, so that he should have a shaykhus to Pesach Sheini. In other words, you have to take a Yid who by himself may not be so sensitive to the idea of Teshuva, and you bring him into the Cheder Sheni, that the inyan of Cheder Sheni is a place that's designated for the Avodas HaTeshuva, and help him reach the Madrega of Pesach Sheini, because the inyan of Pesach Sheini is Teshuva. When you know that the Eibush that always gives you a second chance, you take advantage of that opportunity, and you try to heal yourself, try to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the Chassidish expression. You take the Nefesh HaShenis, the Neshama, and you bring him into the Cheder Sheni, which is an environment which is destined for Teshuva. And then you're able to reach the Madrega of Pesach Sheini. Amazalken and Teshuva. You should be able to do Teshuva. You know? The Rebbe, our Rebbe, once told a story by Fabrengen about one of the grandchildren of the Tzemach Tzedek. It's a fascinating story. It's a little story of children. The Rabbeim had kids. And the Rabbeim's children played. Not all the Rabbeim's kids were born holy, were born, like the expression is, they were never children. Most of the children of the Beis Harav were once little. They probably were very intelligent, they probably were very well raised, but they were children, and they played. So the kids were playing a game of hide and seek. And you know how kids are, they start a game, they play for a while, they lose interest, they play another game. One of the children had a very good hiding place, and nobody found them. The game was over, they stopped playing hide and seek, they moved on to a different place, and he or she was still in the hiding place. Anyway, after enough time, they realized that no one is going to look for them, and no one's going to find them, the game was over. So they came out of that hiding place crying. And they were crying, how come nobody found me? How come nobody found me? So then, of course, the way the story is explained, yeah? What do you mean, how come nobody found you? The whole idea was that you should hide and not get found. So you hid so well that nobody found you. You should be proud of yourself that you weren't found. And of course the answer is, as much as we hide, we want to be found. As much as we say we're not interested, we're really interested. As much as we say it's not our thing, it is our thing. And when we're told by words or by actions, we're not looking for you anymore, we cry. When a person gets the impression that nobody is interested in our Pesach Sheini, you want to hide? Go hide. I'm not looking for you. We cry. We hide. We hide. We run away. We make it very clear we're not interested. That the Korban Pesach needs to be brought and I'm tummy. That the Korban Pesach needs to be brought and I'm b'derech ha'cheika. Moreover, I'm tummy and b'derech ha'cheika not because of something which is beyond my control. I'm tummy b'derech ha'cheika's lochem. I'm choosing not to be metayer myself. I'm choosing myself not to come into Yerushalayim. And I scream, how come you don't look for me? And I cry, why did you stop looking for me? That's the pnimius of Pesach Sheini. The pnimius of Pesach Sheini is Nitake Fafal, and when people say, forget about them, they're a lost case. When you say about another human being, they're a lost case. Yeah, I am a teacher. And I have many students. And I wake up every single morning with the guilt of how many of my students I was unable to reach. And I didn't have the right hashpah. But the most painful feeling that I have is for the students that in my own mind I said, I cannot reach them. And it haunts me. I mean, some of those students are now in their mid-40s. You can't always, here I talk about Pesach Sheini, to go back to that time and that space 30, 32, 33 years ago and be able to repair it is a very, very difficult thing. The most difficult is the ones that you gave up on, not the ones that you tried and failed, the ones you gave up on. Because Pesach Sheini says that it's never a Jew is never lost. And like I said, the story reveals that when a Jew finds out that he's been forgotten, nobody cares, no one's coming back to get you, he cries, "Why didn't you find me?" What do you mean, why did you find me? You didn't want to be found. We came to you, we looked for you, we wanted to bring you in. He said, "I'm not interested." When the Yid finds out that nobody is looking for him, he cries, "Why did you stop looking?" That's Pesach Sheini. Pesach Sheini is, it's never too late. The reason it's never too late is because the Eibishter's interest is not the mitzvahs and the Torah. The Eibishter's interest is a Yid. And the Eibishter does not let a Yid get lost. It's L'yidach min anidach really means the Eibishter makes sure that every Jew comes back. One way or another, von Asipa from Frierdik Rebbe. There's a wonderful story with the Frierdik Rebbe. It's really a wonderful story. You all know that about 100 years ago, 110 years ago, 120 years ago, the world went through a period that's called the isms. Isms basically means philosophies of life. There was communism, there was Yiddishism, there was socialism, there was anarchism, there were many isms. There was nationalism, there was pluralism, many isms. The age of the isms, which is not today, believe me, was a very intellectual age. Everybody was a big intellectual. Everyone was learning, using their brains, and using their seichel to justify their shita. Everybody wanted to prove and to argue that their derech is correct. There were multiple isms, and that was the constant in all of the isms. Everybody had a philosophy which explained how they were living. It was the tkuf of isms. As a consequence of this, Yiddishkeit was very severely challenged. From Yidden, we're hearing from every side, there's new ideas, there's new philosophies, and unfortunately many Yidden went into what's called Beidas Nishbarim. They went into those other isms. Now, Lubavitch, Temchat Mimim, Lubavitch, the Rabbeim, in the Soviet Union, had a kibbutz. They were able to get the Mamish community. The only ones that really had a community in Russia were Lubavitchers. But don't think for 1 second that every Lubavitcher was saved. There were many that were lost, unfortunately, in different ways. You know, you have, how do you call it? You have a Chassidish Apakatis. You know what's a Chassidish Apakatis? He doesn't believe in God, but he's a Chassidish Yid. If you don't believe in God, how can you be a Chassidish Yid? Because you say you don't believe in God, but the neshama, the fire of Chassidus burns inside. I tell you always the same story with Shazar. Shazar was an atheist. And whenever he would have trouble, he would sing the Alter Rebbe's Niggun. So his fellow atheists, all the other Zionists, would say to him, Zalman, what are you singing? He says, you'll never understand. I don't believe in the Eibishter, but I'm a Chassidish Yid and I have a Rebbe. If you have a Rebbe, you have an Eibishter. No matter as much as you say you don't have one. So there was a boy who learned in Lubavitch, very, very intelligent, went off to Yisrael, and he became a Zionist. No Shabbos, no kosher, no mikveh, no tefillin, no nothing. And he took a job as a laborer. He couldn't find work. So he used to go to work and lift boulders. He was building Israel. This is the 20s and the 30s, way before the so-called establishment of the state of Israel. Anyway, the Frierdik Rebbe came to Israel. And this guy was torn to shreds. Why? He loved the Frierdik Rebbe. The Frierdik Rebbe was not his Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab was his Rebbe. The Frierdik Rebbe was his Manal Pel. The Frierdik Rebbe was the principal of the yeshiva. He rebelled against everything the Frierdik Rebbe stood for her. But he was the Frierdik Rebbe's a kid. You can't change. You know, they say a leopard can't change its stripes. A person was in Lubavitch. It stays with them forever. The Rebbe is in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe just survived Yimach Shmei V'Smei Stalin. Yimach Shmei V'Zichei Stalin. And this guy was torn. Mitzad Echad, how could he not see the Rebbe? Mitzad Hasheni, the Rebbe's going to look at me. What a disappointment. I'm everything he doesn't want me to be. So he made a achlata that he's going to go to work without a shirt. Just in shorts. He's going to walk around in such a way that it will be absolutely an embarrassment that the Rebbe should see him like this. And he also decided that instead of going through the city, he's going to walk around. And every day the Rebbe was in the city, I think it was Tel Aviv, he went without a shirt, and he took a long, long route to avoid the place where the Frierdik Rebbe was staying. Anyway, one day his Poshet was late for work. And he got up and he had to run to work. And without thinking, he ran through the center of town. And he ran right by the house where the Friedrich Rebbe was staying. And this was too much for him. So he walked in without a shirt. And the Rebbe looks up, and the Rebbe sees him. And the Rebbe says to him, Medreitzach u medreitzach u mezetzach. In Yiddish, this works a lot better than in English. Medreitzach, you go around and you go around, but we meet. He didn't criticize him, he didn't give him musar, he didn't ask him where his shirt was, or where his yarmulke was, and where his tzitzis was. He told him we avoid, and we avoid, and we avoid, and we avoid, and we meet. A Yid is never lost. And that's the story. Medreitzach or medreitzach, you try to avoid it, try to avoid it, try to avoid it. Zreik chutra avira ikre koi. When you throw it, says in the Gemara, it's brought in Hayem Yeb, you throw a stick up to the air, it comes down to its ikre, its root. And the root of it is the Mebishn. And that's Pesach Sheini. Medreitzach or medreitzach or bezetzach. And this is the koyach of Teshuva. That no matter wherever a Yid goes, he always is connected. And he's never lost. The reason he's never lost is because the Eibishter's interest is in him. And therefore the Eibishter sees to it, that every verse the Rebbe used to bring always, V'atam to look to Echad Beis Yisrael. You know, the Rasha sits by the Seder, and you tell him, Ilu haya sham lo haya nigla. At B'nai Mitzrayim he wouldn't have gone out. No. So how does the Chassidus teach it? Ilu haya sham lo haya nigla. In Mitzrayim he would not have gone out. But when Mashiach comes, there's no such thing as a Jew that's lost. And the Yom Tif, which represents it, is Pesach Sheini. In other words, you could almost say that Pesach Sheini is the Yom Tif of Teshuva. We all know the Yom Tif of Teshuva is Yom Kippur. The Rambam says it. The Yom Tif of Teshuva is Rosh Hashanah, said it's made Teshuva. But they celebrate doing Teshuva. The Koyach HaTeshuva, the idea that there's no such thing as a Jew who cannot do Teshuva, this is Pesach Sheini. So I'll see you all on Monday. Thank you all for listening and for coming.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's only Tuesday, but I'm saying it's only Tuesday, but I'm saying good Shabbos anyway because I'm not going to see you before Shabbos. Okay, Zayt Alagazant.
Thank you.
Yeah, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.